bring you to attention, please. Ms. Markey, if you could please confirm that we are live streaming. Thank you. Well, welcome councillors in the room, in the chambers, and councillors that are participating online, to our executive team members that are here in the chambers, and to all the media and community members who may be listening in online. Welcome to the October Ordinary Meeting of Council. As I said, this council meeting will be a hybrid version, as we have elected member that is joining us online. And just make the point that this will be the second last ordinary council meeting of this group of 9 elected members that were elected by our community back in 2016. I'd like to start our meeting with an acknowledgement of country, and I would like to acknowledge the Kamilaroi people as the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather, and pay my respects to elders both past and present, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal community members who may be either with us in this room or listening online. Councillors and executive team, now I might ask if you please stand for prayer. Eternal God, our loving Father, we come to Thee this day in the name of Jesus Christ, who is the lover of our souls and the saviour of all mankind. May we feel His love and respond to it. May His Spirit shine in lives that are darkened by worry, doubt, or fear. Strengthen and guide those who are trying to do what is right. Make it plain to them. Make us more mindful of the needs of our fellow men and less absorbed in selfish concerns, that Christ may approve and bless what we do here this day. We ask these blessings in His name. Amen. Please be seated. Councillors, we'll now move on to our bereavements between the 16th of September through to today, the 20th of October. And as a community, we mourn the loss of Joan Valerie Gaynor, Malcolm John Braden, Beryl Joy Circuit, Gregory Errol Holly, Ernest William Badior, Alan James Stewart, Lorna Jean Burtonshaw, Vicky Ann Brazier, Gloria Ellen Herden, and Michael James King. Once again, please, councillors and all those in the chambers, if I could please ask if you could stand for a minute's silence as we pay our respects to the deceased and extend our condolences to all the family and friends of the deceased. Please be seated. We'll now move on to those present and apologies. As you can see on the screen, councillors, we have a full representation of 9 elected members and also our full executive team, so there are no apologies. We'll move on to confirmation of previous minutes. Firstly, the minutes of the ordinary meeting held on the 15th of September were received, and that they are adopted as being true and correct record of the meeting. I'll ask for a mover of that motion. Thank you, Councillor Moses, and seconded by Councillor Hook. I'll put that motion. All in favour? Against? Declare that motion carried. Move right along to our next item, which is item 5.2, and that is the minutes of the extraordinary meeting held on Wednesday, the 6th of October, 2021. That they were received and that they are adopted as being a true and correct record of the meeting. And I'll call, thank you, Councillor Fuller has moved that and Councillor Hook has seconded that motion. So I'll put that motion. All in favour? Against? call that unanimously carried. So we'll now move on to our next item on the agenda, which is declarations of interest, and I'll call for any declarations of interest in relation to the October Ordinary Meeting of Council. While you're considering that, both elected members and executive team, I'll read out those declarations that have already been received by the organisation. I have two. My first declaration is in relation to item 11.1, which is the Northern Regional Planning Panel Technical Representative nominations. I've listed that as pecuniary, and the reason is the company owned by myself contracts work to Six Hills Group, which is the alternate delegate suggested in the report. And the second one is item 11.5, Whitehaven Coal Sponsorship and Donation Committee. I've listed my declaration as pecuniary, as my reason is the company owned by myself supplies goods and services to Whitehaven Coal. So both of those items I'll be leaving the chamber. And for item 11.5, I believe the Deputy Mayor is also declaring, so there will be a requirement to have another councillor chair the meeting. For item 11.1, the Deputy Mayor will chair for that meeting, for that item, sorry. The next item, actually Councillor Swain, Councillor O'Keefe and Councillor Hook all have a declaration in relation to item 11.5, which is Whitehaven Coal Sponsorship and Donation Committee. Councillor Swain's declaration is less than significant non-pecuniary. Son is employed by Whitehaven Coal, son-in-law is employed by Whitehaven. Councillor O'Keefe's is pecuniary. Councillor Swain, will you be staying in the chambers for the determination? You'll be leaving the chambers, thank you. Councillor O'Keefe, his declaration is pecuniary as he's an employee of Whitehaven Coal, and he'll be leaving the chambers for the debate and determination of that item. And Councillor Hook has listed his declaration as less than significant non-pecuniary, as Councillor Hook is the chair of IMEX committee with Whitehaven Coal as the major sponsor. Councillor Hook, will you be remaining in the chambers for the determination of that item?
I shall be leaving.
You shall be leaving. Thank you. I'll now call for any further declarations of interest in relation to the October Ordinary Meeting of Council. No further declarations. Thank you. Item 7 is community representations, and there are no presentations. Item 8 is Merrill Minute, and councillors, I have a Merrill Minute and I've supplied a copy for you all, and I'll just read through my Merrill Minute. The Merrill Minute is actually a 5-year term, which will be a 5-year and 3-month term of this elected group of councillors. My recommendation is that the Merrill Minute be received and noted. Well, councillors, we come to the end of what has been one of the longest terms in local government here in Gunnedah history, if not the longest. Because of the pandemic, as we know, our term has been extended several times. As I said, 5 years and 3 months of triumphs and also challenges. Of 2 steps forwards at some times and 1 step backwards. For the 5 years, we have continued to work together to make our Shire a better place to live. When we were elected back in 2016, none of us knew what laid ahead or in store for our community and our country. Devastating drought, a mouse plague, and a devastating also pandemic that continues to change the way that we look at the world and our local community functions. But despite these considerable threats, our resilient community and economy has built on its foundations to remain strong and to work towards an even stronger future. Australian Bureau of Statistics figures showed back in 2016 in September, when we were elected, Gunnedah had an unemployment rate that was just over 8%. Now that rate has reduced and maintained a lower figure right through this pandemic of just over 5%, lower than the regional New South Wales average, state, and the national rates, which is the first time in this 5 years, I think, that that's actually happened for us. We have seen significant new investment in the Gunnedah Shire, and as a council, I believe we have reconnected with our business community through our economic development focus and initiatives such as the $3.2 million Community Resilience Program. Over the term of council, the Shire has benefited from close to $200 million worth of projects when you include recurrent grants, the hospital and the overpass. We have worked closely with all levels of government to make this possible, including a record year of major works this financial year we're in. We have seen a new wastewater treatment plant, new road over rail bridge, a new Ganondorf to Cluis pipeline, Libby's Place completed, along with major important road projects. Whilst we have achieved this record spending on infrastructure, we have not only maintained a solid financial base for the Ganondorf Shire, but we have actually improved its already strong position. Our new economic development strategy lays out an exciting pathway for the future across a diverse range of industries. We are looking ahead with enthusiasm as projects like the Sale Yard redevelopment and the Koala Hospital and Century take shape. And we will continue to maintain a strong position in advocacy for our community for improvements where it matters, including a better healthcare system. I thank you for the privilege you have afforded me in choosing me as your spokesperson and mayor for the council for those 5 years. I'm proud of what we have achieved. We have not given up in difficult times and have shown our support for our community. I'd also like to take this opportunity to recognise 2 hardworking councillors who have indicated they will retire after this term. Thank you to our longest serving and first female mayor, Gai Swain, a tireless campaigner for Ganondorf. Councillor Swain stood steadfast during some of the Shire's toughest times. She's also responsible for changes and programs that have created benefits for our community, like the Community Scholarship Fund. She's always humble, but has won awards that are a reflection of her many years of dedication. Councillor Owen Hasler, another former mayor and councillor for more than 20 years, is also a passionate supporter of our community. Councillor Hasler livens our debates and has represented the community in many areas, including water, mining, and the arts. Thank you to Councillor Hasler. I'd also like to thank our General Manager, Eric Groth, and all of our staff within the Ganondorf Council who work each day, not only to deliver essential services to our community, but go beyond to improve our Shire that we live in. We still have a month or so to go, but I'd like to thank all of our councillors, a party of 9 very different people who are elected to represent our community. I believe we have done so to the best of our ability despite very difficult times. Election day will find Ganondorf in a secure place to face a bright future. And I'd also like to thank our community I'm very proud to have served. So thank you all. And thank you to those councillors retiring. So I'll move that Merrill minute and I'll put that Merrill minute. All in favour? I assume so. Thank you. Declared that carried. Next item on the agenda is our General Manager's reports, and we'll start with item 9.1, and that is NEMOI Unlimited Member Value Report, and I'll hand over to Mr. Groth to detail the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, the report is recommended for your receival and noting, and pleased to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Groth. I'll now call an elected member to move the recommendation. Thank you, Councillor Hook, and seconded by Councillor Swain. Councillor Hook, as a mover of the motion, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Only really just to say that we had a presentation earlier today about this document. It is something that I think this council has very, very wisely joined the joint organisation of councils. The benefits that have accrued and are continuing to accrue as a result of the joint organisation of council is enormous, and I think we've yet to see the major benefits coming forward. I'd also like to pay my respect and homage to you as chair of that organisation, Reece, for the way that you've actually steered the organisation into the future, and thank you very, very much, and I commend this to other councillors.
Thank you, councillor Hook. Do I have an elected member who'd like to ask a question or speak against the motion? Councillor Swain is a second to the motion, used to speak.
Just echoing what councillor Hook said, Mr Mayor, it was an organisation when the JOs first started. I think we weren't real sure just which direction they were heading and just what benefit it would be for us as a community. But I think the benefit has been shown from the report that was presented today. So well done.
Thank you, councillor Swain. Well, councillors, just before I put this motion, I'd certainly like to thank councillor Hook for your kind words. It is an organisation that I'm very passionate about. The 5 mayors that sit together that are focused on a regional economy. So it's taking away the borders of all of our LGAs and thinking about how we improve our entire region, because we all understand that for a region to prosper, we need all of the shires to actually go ahead and to prosper. So and I think it's actually on a very good pathway. So thank you for your kind words. In saying that, councillors, I'd now like to put the motion. All in favour? Against? Declare that motion carried. We'll now move on to item 9.2, New South Wales Rural Doctors Network Engagement Update, and I'll hand back to Mr Groth to detail the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This report provides an update to the council and community on the work of New South Wales Rural Doctors Network in developing a strategy to address the shortage of GPs in the Ganondorf Shire. Pleased to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr Groth. I call an elected member to move the recommendation become the motion. Thank you, councillor Fuller, and seconded by councillor Swain. Councillor Fuller, as the mover of the motion, do you wish to speak to the motion?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Do I have an elected member who'd like to ask a question or speak against this motion? Councillor Swain, as a seconder to the motion, would you like to speak?
Just a quick comment, I guess, Mr Mayor. The report is very detailed, and it was a pleasure to read through the enormous amount of information that's contained. I know it hasn't actually brought a doctor to sit in an office in Ganondorf, but I guess it's one of those steps that we need to do before we get to the next step, so the next stage. So hopefully this will lead to the outcome that we're looking for.
Thank you, councillor Swain. I too also agree with that. It was actually November last year where there was a resolution of this council to call on the Rural Doctors Network to come and assist us with the strategy, and we're certainly 3/4 of the way through that now, and I'm sure in the future we'll see major benefits when that strategy is rolled out. Councillors, I'd now like to put the motion. All in favour? Against? Declare that motion carried as well. I'll hand back to Mr Groth to detail his recommendation in item 9.3.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This report seeks 2 delegates to attend the LG New South Wales Annual Conference. It's a virtual conference this year at the end of November. I do note, as per contained in the report, that we have nominated the Mayor and Deputy Mayor as the voting delegates. However, should you wish to have different delegates attend, we do have the ability to change those voting delegates if so required.
Thank you, Mr Groth. Councillors, you'll see in your business paper there is a motion or a recommendation there, and it's calling for 2 nominations. So I will call for nominations. Councillor Swain.
Yes, Mr Mayor, seeing as it was moved before, I'll move the recommendation that council approve the attendance of 2 councillors, the Mayor, Councillor Chaffey, and the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Rob Hook, to attend the 1-hour virtual New South Wales Annual Conference.
Thank you, councillor Swain. Thank you, councillor Swain. Councillor Hook, do you accept the recommendation, the nomination?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor, I do.
I also accept the nomination. Thank you, councillor Swain. Is there a seconder to councillor Swain's? Thank you, councillor Campbell. The second of the 2 nominations. I'll call for any further nominations. Second call for any further nominations. Be the case, then I'll put the motion. All in favour? Against? Declare that motion carried. Now move on to item 9.4, donation of prize, Ganondorf High School, and I'll hand back to Mr Groth to detail that recommendation.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This report seeks the endorsement of council of the action to provide a donation to the annual prize giving contribution for St Mary's College. For Ganondorf High School, sorry.
Thank you for Ganondorf High School. Thank you, Mr Groth. I'll call for a move of the recommendation. Thank you, councillor Fuller, and seconded by councillor Moses. Councillor Fuller, do you wish to speak to the motion?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Only that I'd be happy to move the second one as well, if you wish, for St Mary's.
Well, councillor Fuller, I have at the moment, you're a mover of this motion. Would you like to combine 9.4 and 9.5? Is that
Thank
your
you.
suggestion?
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Moses, as the seconder of this motion, are you happy to also second both motions?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
So councillors, you'll understand now, we have a motion is to determine both 9.4 and 9.5. 9.4 is donation of prize Ganondorf High School. 9.5 is donation of prize St Mary's College. They are, as we're debating and we'll determine, they will be both of these items together. So councillor Fuller has moved the motion. I'll now call for elected member who'd like to speak against that motion. Councillor Moses, as a seconder to the motion, do you wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Is there any further questions or debate, councillors, before I put this motion? As I remind you, will be both 9.4 and 9.5 together. No, be the case then, councillors. I put the motion. All in favour? It's unanimously supported. Thank you. So I'll now move on to the last item in the General Manager's reports, and that is 9.6 investments. Thank you, Mr. Groth.
Thank you, Council. This report details Council's investments as at the end of September, and pleased to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Groth. I now call for elected member to move that recommendation to become the motion. I'll call a second time. Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Luke has moved the motion and it is seconded by Councillor Hall. Councillor Luke, as a mover of the motion, do you wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Do I have an elected member who'd like to speak against the motion or ask a question? Councillor Hook, as a seconder to the motion, do you wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Be the case then, council, as I put this motion, all in favour?
Aye.
Again, unanimously supported. Thank you for your contribution to our ordinary meeting, Mr. Groff. We'll now move on to the Director of Corporate and Community Services reports, and I'll call on Mr. Foreman to detail his recommendations, starting with item 10.1, Councillor Induction Program. Thank you, Mr. Foreman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The councillor induction program is presented for councillors. This is the induction program that returning and new councillors will undertake in the start of the new term. The dates for the early activities are locked into the report, with the further activities in the plan to be announced and subject to change. But the important thing is to get those initial dates locked in so that returning and prospective councillors know what the workload is going to be like for the first couple of months of the return. The recommendation is that council adopt the councillor induction program as attached to the report, knowing the dates and times of the proposed workshop.
Thank you, Mr. Foreman. I'll call on an elected member to. Thank you. Councillor Hook has moved the motion and seconded by. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Councillor Hook, as a mover of the motion, do you wish to speak?
Mr. Mayor, it's a pretty extensive program. Unfortunately, it happens to come at a pretty early time of the year, but under the circumstances, I think it's necessary that we go with the recommendations and guide that has been presented before us.
Thank you, Councillor Hook. Do I have an elected member who'd like to speak against this motion or ask a question? Councillor O'Keefe, as a seconder of the motion, do you wish to speak? Be the case then, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Against? Declare the motion carried. And I'll hand back to Mr. Foreman to detail his last report, which is the outstanding resolution register in 10.2. Thank you, Mr. Foreman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The outstanding resolution register is presented for the information of councillors. The recommendation is that the information be received and noted.
Thank you, Mr. Foreman. Councillor Hasler has moved that recommendation to become a motion and seconded by Councillor Moses. Thank you. Councillor Hasler, would you like to speak to this motion?
I'd just like to ask the following questions, Mr. Chairman, through you. On page 62, 1609-2020, the electronic signage event, I note that that's been delayed by the RTA or whatever the title is nowadays. it seemed to me somewhat ironical in the sense that the next, I think, decision on council on the same page refers to us asking for that road to be reclassified, and it would then become a local road, which we'd be in control of, and therefore making the decision on. Is that likely to happen in the near future?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I can answer the first part of that question. I might have to refer to my colleague to my left for the second part. Yes, we have had hit a bit of a brick wall, the RMS. The project manager for that project has written to them, spoken about the irony of not being able to put a sign adjacent to a relatively quiet highway as compared to 8-lane highways in Sydney that have video screens above them. So we have put that back to them, and we're just waiting for a response.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hasler in relation to the road classification and review. Roads submitted by council under for consideration under the priority round have not been included. There were a very limited number of roads across the state that were, a total of 394 kilometres out of the up to 15,000 kilometres that the state had committed to. Staff are currently preparing a submission in line with the previous resolution of council with a view to making that submission in December this year. It's expected that that process may take 6 to 12 months to be assessed once the submissions are made. And the state government have indicated as well that the transfer process may be a multiple year process once that happens.
Thank you. The second one relates to page 63, 170620. The CMA, it talks about awaiting a commencement date of what? My question is of what? I understand approval has been given by the planning department on the section 68 changes. So, and I guess that relates also to the 40721 on page 72. We're talking about the lease documents being available. So what was the commencement date referred to, and are the lease documents going to be available in the near future?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'll take that question. Councillor Hasler, the lease has been signed by the General Manager. The council has given him that authority quite a few months ago. That's been given to the CMCA today. Mr. Constable has that in his possession at the moment. Same goes for the MOU in relation to the land. And I believe the commencement date at that stage probably related to when they wanted the lease to commence. And I had a discussion with Mr. Constable last week, and he was happy for it to commence at the end of this month. So that's what the lease reflects.
Well, thank you very much. That sounds like a good outcome all round. Look forward to seeing it constructed. My last one refers to page 63 in terms of the pool finalisation repair. Have we any knowledge when this issue may be resolved and rectification of the significant leak addressed?
Thank you, Councillor Hasler, for the question, and through you, Mr. Mayor. At this stage, it's still contractual conversations occurring between council, the construction contractor, and the designer.
Last comment.
So there's contractual conversations still happening between council, the contractor, and the designer.
Thank you.
I'll now call for elected member who might like to ask a further question or speak against the motion.
Mr. Mayor, as the seconder, seeing that there's nobody else, I have a question for the Director of Planning and Environmental Services through you.
Councillor Moses seconded this motion, so you can speak.
You did you?
You may speak.
Thank you very much. Yes, it relates to item 20.0221 on page 70. The amendment of the LEP rezone private owned E3 environmental managed land to RU1. I do notice that correspondence has been received stating that approval is given for planning proposals to proceed to public exhibition and government agency consultation. Exhibition documents is being prepared to consult with approximately 300 landowners. This has been going on now for a large number of years and affected obviously a very large number of landowners. If I could ask Mr. Johns, has he got any update on when this may be finalised and when the landowners can get some satisfactory result?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and through you, Councillor Hook. Yeah, so essentially where we're at now is, as you pointed out, the Department of Planning has given us authority to exhibit, which is a big tick and a big step forward, I guess. There has been a lot of toing and froing, as you indicated, for a number of years to get to the proposal to this stage. I will just make one slight correction. The resolution register does state 300 landowners. It should be 300 lots. I'll just say clarification of that. The complication with that is for us identifying all those lots. We do have a number of lots with Crown land and Crown roads and such like things occurring within the lots. So we actually have a GIS company at the moment helping us to identify those property owners so that we make sure that we get everybody and nobody's missed. So there's been a couple of meetings today on that exact subject. So I'd like to think that that will be resolved in the coming weeks, and then we'll be able to go on exhibition and bring it back to council.
Thank you.
Councillor Moses, as a seconder of the motion, do you wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Are there any further questions or comments, councillors, before I put this motion? Be the case, put the motion. All in favour? Declare the motion unanimously supported. Thank you. Councillors, the next item is item 11.1, which is the first report for the Director of Planning and Environmental Services report. I have a declaration, so I'll be leaving the chambers for this discussion determination. The Deputy Mayor will now take the chair.
Ms. Barkey, please let the record show that the Mayor has left chambers. Councillors, we now refer to the Director of Planning and Environmental Services report, starting with item 11.1, Northern Regional Planning Panel, Technical Representative Nominations. I hand over to Mr. Johns to outline his recommendation.
Thanks, Mr. Deputy Mayor, and through you, councillors, this report seeks endorsement of nominations for the technical representative and that person's, I guess, alternate delegate in relation to the Northern Regional Planning Panels. As you know, there are state representatives on the regional planning panels, also local ones. We did have 2 staff members appointed, and then the code of conduct for panel members was changed very shortly after that resolution was made, meaning that the staff members were not able to be to act on behalf of council in that regard. So hence why we bring this report to you and we seek endorsement of those 2 delegates.
Councillor Hasler, you wish to move the motion?
Yes, I'd move the motion as in the officer's recommendation.
Do I have a seconder, please? Then Councillor Swain, thank you very much. Councillor Hasler, do you wish to speak?
I think it's been outlined by the officer, but for some of us here also are familiar with Ms. Osling, who did work here briefly.
Thank you, Councillor
Hasler.
Hasler.
For Liverpool Plains prior, so must be quite a sensible recommendation. Happy to support.
Thank you, Councillor Hasler. Any councillor wish to ask a question or speak against the motion? Councillor Fuller, sorry, Councillor Swain.
No, thank you, Mr.
Deputy Mayor.
Deputy Mayor. I was going to say Deputy Mayor or Chairman. I couldn't make up my mind. Thank you.
There will be no further debate. Then I shall put the motion. All those in favour? Against? I declare the motion carried. I'll call back the Mayor. Ms. Markey, if you can let the record show that the Mayor is returning to chambers. Thank you.
So that was carried. So councillors, we'll now move on to our next item, which is item 11.2. Draft Ganondorf Shire Local Housing Strategy, and I'll hand back to Mr. Johns to detail the recommendation that you have before you.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and through you, councillors, you'll all be aware of this draft strategy, the Ganondorf Shire Local Housing Strategy. We had a workshop on the 6th of October where we discussed a number of changes that some councillors had suggested. We workshopped those and we now present to you the new draft Ganondorf Shire Housing Strategy for endorsement for exhibition.
Thank you, Mr. Johns, and Councillor O'Keefe has moved that motion and seconded by Councillor Hasler. Don't often see those 2 names on one motion. Councillor O'Keefe, would you like to speak as the mover of the motion?
Mr. Mayor, that's only
because you don't record every vote on every motion. But anyway, look, I just thank the staff and fellow councillors for the combined work that's gone in to this draft strategy that we're now presenting to the community and broader nation. I'll be that bold, inviting people to come and invest and plan how we are going to run our community or run the housing strategy component of our community, hopefully for the next 10 years and then some. Certainly a lot more of the effort has come from the staff side of the world, but I'm very pleased to see some of the tweaks and put this strategy up. And now the hard work really lays before us, though, as a council, as elected members, as staff, and as a community, to actually put our shoulders behind this document and enact the strategy and get the wheels of progress turning to drive more housing for our Shire.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. I'll call for elected member who'd like to ask a question or speak against this motion. Councillor Hasler, as a second to the motion, do you wish to speak?
Mr. Chairman, I only seconded this motion because I was waiting for 5 years to be able to agree with something that Councillor O'Keefe said. But having achieved that, yes, I thank you as the officer for being able to present the document after the working group session. I would emphasise the fact that some of the phrases there are develop and implement incentives. So there's work to be done yet. It's not the end of the process. It's to some degree the beginning of the process. It talks about actively pursuing partnerships. So we have to achieve those partnerships. Investigate the feasibility of extending the urban footprint. Once again, that's not a guarantee, but that is investigating. And also the issue of surplus owned land. Of course, the later thing that we have to discuss, which is the open spaces strategy, has recommendations, but depending on the feedback from the community, that may or may not be able to be going forward. There may not be any surplus land coming from that report anyway, or there may. So there's a number of variables that are still to be addressed going forward. I won't be one of those looking at the results of the feedback, but I certainly think that what we've put out to the public now is something that they can give us some really decent feedback on. Hopefully they concur with our recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Hasler. And just before I put this motion, councillors, I'd like to comment also to the department through Mr. Johns. I'd like to congratulate all of the work that's been done to date to select, firstly, a consultant to work with council and, more importantly, consult with our community over an extended period of time and different opportunities. I think sometimes it can be very easy for any tier of government to move forward without a good level of consultation, but that certainly hasn't happened here. So I'm very, very pleased with the way that this document's been put together and the participation of our community and certainly councillors. So congratulations, Mr. Johns, and your team in putting this document to us. Councillors, in saying that now, I'd like to put this motion. All in favour? Aye. Call that unanimously supported. Thank you. We'll now move on to item 11.3, development application number 2021-088, construction of dwelling house and attached garage. And I'll hand back to Mr. Johns to detail the recommendation.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and through you, councillors. This report relates to a DA for a dwelling and a garage on Old Cemetery Lane at Killouis. We will note that the title of the report says Ganondorf, so apologies for that typographical error. The DA is before you because it seeks a departure to a development standard that's contained within the DCP. The DCP generally requires separation between an unsealed road and a dwelling of 200 metres, whereas what's proposed by the applicant in this situation is 100 metres. We have had discussions with our engineers in relation to this, and I'm told that it's a very, very low use road. It only services 1 or 2 properties in the cemetery. So in this particular circumstance, we can recommend to council that they approve a departure to that standard, reducing that from 200 down to 100 and approve the DA.
Thank you, Mr. Johns. I'll call for elected member to move. Thank you. Councillor Fuller has moved the recommendation and Councillor Hook has seconded. Councillor Fuller, as the mover of the motion, do you wish to speak to the motion?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
I'll now call for an elected member who'd like to speak against the motion or ask a question. Councillor Hook is the seconder to the motion. Do you wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillors, by show of hand, please. All in favour? Look at the record show that was unanimously supported. We'll now move on to item 11.4, Reconciliation Action Plan Working Group, and I'll hand back to Mr. Johns to detail the recommendation.
Mr Mayor, I'd like to ask councillors to defer this matter and I'll bring a further report to council.
Thank you, Mr. Johns. Councillor Swain, you'd like to
Yes,
defer?
Mr Mayor, I'll move that we defer item 11.4.
Thank you, and seconded by Councillor Moses. I'll now put that motion. All in favour? Also unanimously supported. Thank you. So that will now be deferred into the November ordinary meeting where there'll be a new report come to council, I assume. Thank you, Mr. Johns. Councillors, the next item is 11.5. We have numerous declarations of interest in relation to this item. Councillor Swain, O'Keefe, Hook and myself will be leaving the chambers now for the discussion, debate and determination. Thank you. I'll hand over to our General Manager now to conduct the process of picking a new chair for this item.
Councillors, whilst your peers are exiting the room, can I have a nomination for the position of chair for this item, please? Councillor Hasler, nominated by Councillor Moses. Do you accept the nomination, Councillor Hasler? Are there any other nominations, councillors? In that case, Councillor Hasler, are you prepared to take the chair, and would you like to do so from there?
I prefer to do it from here, Mr. Chairman. Oh, Mr. General Manager. Right, well, we have the report presented here before you. I think I would just point out that there is one error I think we need to identify. That's just on page, where are we? Oh, no, okay. I think there's a reference about the rejection. Oh, no, that's the Whitehaven Agreement. Sponsorship. No, okay. Right, Mr. Johns.
Through you, Mr. Chair. This report, as you would have read, it relates to a request from Whitehaven Coal for a council or representative to sit on their newly formed sponsorship and donation committee. Obviously, it's going to be a fairly short tenure given the upcoming council election, but I would anticipate that a further report would come back to the new council for them to elect a new representative for the new term.
Right, councillors, and just looking up there at Councillor Luke, do we have any someone who would like to move that recommendation with a nomination included? Right, we'll nominate Councillor Fuller. Do I have a second to that nomination? Councillor Campbell seconds. Do we wish to include that the officer's recommendation with Councillor Fuller's name in that, as per the writing there, councillors? Okay, so the motion would therefore read that council endorse Councillor Fuller to be appointed to the Whitehaven Coal Sponsorship and Donation Committee. Right, we have a mover and seconder. Do we have any other? No further nominations, no amendments. So I'll therefore, do you wish to speak to the motion, councillor?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Our seconder?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, well, I'll put that motion then. Those in favour? Against? I declare it carried unanimously. I'll now call upon the councillors to return to the room, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you.
Carrie. Thank you, councillors. We'll now move on to item number 12 on your business papers. And that is the first report for the Director of Infrastructure Services reports. And that is item 12.1, Ganondorf Water Supply Strategy Public Exhibition. And I'll hand to Mr. Bartlett to detail the recommendation before you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. The purpose of this report is to seek councillors' endorsement to publicly exhibit the draft Ganondorf Water Supply Strategy for 28 days.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett. I'll now call for elected member to move the recommendation to become a motion.
I'll move that one.
Thank you. Councillor Hasler has moved the motion and seconded by Councillor Swain. Councillor Hasler, as the mover of the motion, would you like to speak to this motion?
I have.
Do I have elected member who'd like to speak against the motion or ask a question? Councillor Swain is seconded to the motion. Would you like to speak?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's self-explanatory. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Swain. Will that be the case? I'll put the motion. All in favour? I'll declare the motion carried. We're moving right along to item 12.2, draft policy, permanent road closure, public exhibition. I'll hand back to Mr. Bartlett to detail the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. The purpose of this report is to seek council resolution to publicly exhibit the draft road closure policy for a period of 28 days and adopt if no submissions are received.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett. I'll now call for elected member to move the recommendation and become the motion. Thank you, Councillor Campbell, seconded by Councillor Hasler. Thank you. Councillor Campbell, as a mover of the motion, do you wish to speak to the motion?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's pretty self-explanatory.
Do I have an elected member who'd like to speak against the motion or ask a question? Councillor Hasler, as a seconder to the motion, do you wish to speak? Be the case, then I'll put the motion. All in favour? Right. I'll declare that unanimously supported. Moving right along to item 12.3, we have a draft open space strategy public exhibition, and I'll call on Mr. Bartlett to detail the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. The purpose of this report is to seek council's approval to publicly exhibit the draft open space strategy for a period of 60 days so that community consultation can take place and that any changes required can be included in the final strategy.
Thank you. I'll now call for a move of the recommendation. Got Councillor Hasler has moved, Councillor O'Keefe has seconded the motion.
No, I actually wish to make a point of order, Mr. Mayor, if I may.
You may.
Before we move this. I don't believe we have a copy of the draft strategy that we're being asked to put on exhibition as part of our business paper. So I'm unsure if we've seen the document that we're considering whether it goes on exhibition or not. I'm not sure how to raise that as a point of order, but I think it's important that we work that out before we agree or vote on this issue.
I'll defer to our General Manager for comment. No, Mr. Bartlett, I'll defer to you.
My understanding is that the report indicates that the draft strategy is provided under separate cover and that.
So I'll apologise that I've worked this out today, but I've got a version of the draft that was uploaded to Dropbox at the start of August. And I know we've workshopped significantly as a council the document since then. I can't find a more recent version.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I received a copy. I've got it here on my iPad, and I also had one printed. So there is a copy available.
Called Directory Infrastructure Services between the two HDO documents, the board strategy. So that was all the attachments relative to the Director of Infrastructure Services reports.
Thank you. So we'll move right along, and we have Councillor Hasler has moved the motion. I'll call for a seconder of the motion. Thank you. Councillor Moses has seconded the motion. Councillor Hasler, would you like to speak to the motion as the mover?
Mr. Chairman, I'd be delighted to speak to this particular document, as we've been waiting for some time to receive it. So, and so it is good that we have now have it before us and able to take it out to the community for their commentary. And I know it's taken a fair bit of work to get to this point, and there have been a lot of reasons for interruptions, etc. Unfortunately, some of us, or at least two of us around this table, won't be here to have input further when the commentary does take place now. But I think it's important that the recommendation here is here for 60 days because the document is, in fact, a very large one. And in fact, it can't be downloaded by email. It's that big. So people, will have to get a hard copy or whatnot to be able to even read through it, to have the input which we would like them to have. So giving them 60 days to get it, obtain it, and to go through it and make comment is a sensible. As I say, it is unfortunate that some of us would like to have commentary on it. Would have liked to have had commentary. I don't think I'll stand just to get that opportunity. I may take the opportunity just to put a submission in to at least have some say in what the outcome. So I recommend it to my fellow councillors to adopt it, and let's have the community have a say.
Thank you, Councillor Haslett. I'll now call for elected member who'd like to ask a further question or speak against this motion. Councillor Moses, as a seconder to the motion, do you wish to speak to it?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Well, just before I put this motion, councillors, I'd like to say once again, thank you to our organisation under the stewardship of Mr. Bartlett and his team for the selection of a very competent contractor to help us to put this, as Councillor Haslett has articulated, quite a significant document together that has a 10-year vision for our community. Very important also that there's been significant community consultation in the development of this document. No doubt there'll be some components that some will love and some will have second thoughts about. So it's great that it's on public exhibition for 60 days. I also agree with that. But this document works hand in hand with the suite of strategies that we've currently have or under review or are developing at the moment to make sure that our community is a great place to live, where families can grow, where young people can have great opportunities, and will have sporting facilities and great leisure facilities well into the future. So in saying that, councillors, I'm very proud of this document. I'm going to now put the motion. All in favour? Aye. And call that unanimously supported. Thank you. We'll now move forward on to item 12.4, draft policy, medical professionals, and I'll hand back to Mr. Bartlett. Detail the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. The purpose of this report is to seek Council's endorsement of the draft policy, medical professionals accommodation support, following exhibition, should no submissions be received.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett. I'll now call for elected member to move the recommendation. Thank you, Councillor Fuller, seconded by Councillor Hook. Thank you. Councillor Fuller, as a mover of the motion, do you wish to speak to the motion?
All I'd like to say is congratulations on that document. We've got to move forward. We've got to get the best we can for this community. So congratulations, and I hope the community see that it's a wise move for Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller. Do I have elected member who'd like to ask a further question or speak against this motion? Councillor Hook, as a seconder to the motion, would you like to speak?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Be the case, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Against? Declare the motion carried. Thank you. Moving on, item 12.5, Ganondorf wastewater effluent reuse option review. I'll hand back to Mr. Bartlett to detail this very detailed recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. The purpose of this report is to advise Council of the outcomes following a review of Ganondorf wastewater effluent reuse sustainability and an investigation into the effluent reuse requirements for municipal use of treated effluent and a reuse options assessment. Based on the assessment, it's recommended that Council continue with the existing reuse arrangement, which involves the transfer of all effluent to North Gunnerbull for beneficial reuse under an existing reuse agreement. in terms of alternative reuse pathways, if that reuse scheme were to end, partnering with other third parties for agriculture reuse is likely to be the most cost-effective option.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett, and that's moved by Councillor Hook and seconded by Councillor Hasler. Councillor Hook, as mover of the motion, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and congratulations to you, Mr. Bartlett, on a very, very thorough document. I found it a most interesting read. Some of it I actually technically didn't understand, but I think it's a great outcome. We're going back a number of years. We asked for a review to see whether there was any other ways we could use our wastewater. And it's nice to know that there's actually what I'd call a positive outcome, probably not the one we necessarily thought we were going to get, but a very, very positive outcome in knowing where we need to go in the future without spending a bucket load of money. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hook. If an elected member would like to ask a question or speak against the motion.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, I do wish to ask a question.
Well, as a seconder of the motion, Councillor Hasler, I was just coming to you, so over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I'm seconded this to make sure that I had the opportunity to ask a question, because this was something I was fairly hopeful that we may have been able to use, look at a reuse process. And I want to thank Mr. Bartlett for giving us that very detailed report. I waded through it with some difficulty. The jargon and the technical and commentary was fairly, not only fairly boring, but fairly difficult for me to comprehend. But what it appears, though, is that the recos are predicated on an unlimited supply of bore water for domestic, commercial and council park use going forward. I'm just a bit concerned about that. And I couldn't work out, it may have been in the document, what is the percentage of our water usage used on parks and gardens as compared to the domestic and other usage, and what if water demand due to, I hear a lot in here about development and growth. My concern is if we get all this, possible development and growth, water supply that we have is not unlimited. So what happens when we get to a point, and I think what was suggested from my reading of the report, that would go up 50%. We recommend, we're sort of foreseeing possible 50% growth, which is at least a 50% demand extra on what we have in supply now. What happens when we get to that position? Are we still able to use the same amount of water for supplying our parks and gardens, or would we need to consider, once again, at that point, I guess, reconsider the idea of reuse, because a lot of other communities are using that reuse. So how long is this going to provide us with an alternative, basically, I'm asking?
Mr. Bartlett, Councillor Hasler is asking you for very detailed information. If you feel like you need to speculate in your answer, I'd prefer you take it on notice.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, I can provide a reasonably short summary that will, I think, provide Councillor Hasler with the information that he needs. Whilst our water supply is not unlimited, it certainly does have constraints. Our percentage of, and I would need to get more information in order to provide the exact ratio of water used on our municipal sports fields versus residential use. However, I can provide an assurance that it would be a very small fraction of our overall water usage in our community. We, per residential connection, do have a very high use of water in Ganondorf Shire compared to other local government areas across the state. My advice to council would be that we need to do quite a lot of work in the sustainability space, and that should that work occur and our community be using water in a more sustainable way, that there's significant capacity for us to continue to grow within our existing current water allocations that are provided by the New South Wales Government.
I'll now call for elected member who'd like to ask a further question. Councillor O'Keefe.
Oh, not so much a further question, but as an elected member, I guess I can speculate. So I was going to thank the director for his overly complex and long and thorough reports, because it makes me more embarrassed about the previous report that I couldn't find, because I actually did read the 4 other technical documents and took great pleasure in doing so over the weekend. But because I'm an elected member and I can speculate, and I do have an envelope and a pen handy at times, I worked out that for the cost of the next cheapest option, other than following the status quo in terms of reusing our water at current market rates, we could more than double our current water supply from the Namoy groundwater. So it would remain significantly fiscally more intelligent for our community to keep purchasing irrigation water and selling irrigation water back, if that makes any sense, to allay Councillor Hasler's fear, until the point we've more than doubled our current water usage.
So, councillors, we've had plenty of debate, so I'm going to put the motion. All in favour?
Just a quick comment, Mr. Mayor, I guess because I was involved in this very early on, and I think the staff, a great thank you to the staff, because over the years there have been some very visionary staff in that position who can see the need and the opportunity for us as a council to look at different ways of using our water. And it was a big decision at that time when the decision was made to offer the reuse. And congratulations to everyone who was involved, because it was a big step for us as a smaller community, and now it's proven and I was really pleased to read this, even if it's got 1 log, 2 log, 3 logs. I wasn't sure how many logs they were going to put on the fire, but anyway, I was very encouraged to know that we were doing the right thing at the moment. So thanks very much.
It's great to see there's so much love in this October ordinary meeting so far. So, councillors, I'm now going to put the motion. All in favour? Against? Declare the motion carried. Moving on, item 12.6. Item 12.6, Car Park Direct Development Contribution Plan, and I'll hand back to Mr. Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, the purpose of this report is to advise Council on the need and value that could be provided by developing and implementing a car parking contribution plan as requested by Council resolution, and seek a budget allocation to undertake the required work to develop one.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett. Councillor Hasler wishes to move this motion, and it's seconded by Councillor Hook. Councillor Hasler, would you like to speak as the mover of the motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I think I'm pleased to see that this recommendation is in this paper, and it was raised, I think, by some submission to something we were looking at a few months back. It would appear to me that this gives us greater flexibility and ensures that all developers will pay something towards providing car parking in our community, whether they provide it on their own land or whether they provide funding for it to be provided elsewhere. So to me, that's a very good outcome. It provides more parking, and it ensures that there is greater equity in who is providing and putting money into that development. So I think it's a very good outcome.
Thank you, Councillor Hasler, for keeping that short. Do I have an elected member who'd like to speak against the motion or ask a question? Councillor Hook is the second of the motion. Do you wish to speak?
Mr. Mayor, I think that Councillor Hasler has covered it adequately. Thank you.
Thank you. Just before I put this motion to, I'd like to just add quickly also, I see this as a great enabler for those projects that simply wouldn't go ahead if it wasn't for the opportunity for a car parking contribution to go ahead, as we're about to vote on this contribution plan. Many times we've seen this has been a major complication in potential development projects that could have gone ahead that haven't been able to. So this certainly gives a lot more flexibility, and I'm very encouraged to support this. So in saying that, councillors, I'd like to ask by show of hands, all in favour? Unanimously supported. Well done. Moving right along, item 12.7, creation and transfer of Quarry operation restricted asset, and I'll hand back to Mr. Bartlett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, the purpose of this report is to propose the creation of a new Quarry operations restricted asset for the purpose of funding the ongoing operations and lifecycle management costs of council's quarry assets.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett. I now call an elected member to move this recommendation become the motion. Thank you, councillor Luke. I saw you. A seconder to the motion, please. Councillor Swain has seconded the motion. Councillor Luke, as the mover of the motion, do you wish to speak to the motion?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It seems to make a lot of financial sense to undertake this work on the quarries. Thanks.
Thank you. I now call for elected member who'd like to speak against the motion or ask a question.
Mr. Chairman, I usually would oppose to giving the Director of Infrastructure Services more money to spend, but I guess in this particular instance, providing we get a better outcome from our quarry operations, which would seem to be sensible to do it. So it's very reluctant in this last meeting to go down that track.
So should I have the record show, councillor Hasler, you're in favour of the motion? I should, right. Councillor Swain is the seconder to the motion. Do you wish to speak to the motion?
Not really a lengthy report or a lengthy talk, Mr. Mayor. I can't even think of the word, but I think it's the quarries are becoming so important in our community that I think that we find that it's finding it more and more difficult to get those quarry products. I think it's a great opportunity, and yeah, good idea. Thank you. Second.
Thank you, councillor Swain. Councillors, I'd now like to put the motion. All in favour? I'll call that unanimously supported. Thank you. We're moving right along. Oh, thank you, Mr. Bartlett. That was your last report. Councillors, next item on the agenda is item 13, reports to committee. We have a resolution that is that the minutes of the Planning and Environmental and Development Committee meeting report on the 6th of October were received and that they are adopted as being a true and correct record. I'll now call for a mover. Thank you, councillor Swain, and seconded by councillor Moses. And I'll put that motion. All in favour? Aye. And yep, unanimously carried. Next, we have Delegates Report, item 14.1, Murray-Darling Association Delegates Report for October 2021. And I might hand over to councillor Campbell if you'd like to speak to this report briefly and move the motion, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, the report is in front of you there. The Delegates Report is pretty self-explanatory. There's lots of info in it. There's an ugly mug in there as well from the BCLP, which was conducted back in Collarenebro in April. There's still about 7 of those courses to be done there in Victoria and South Australia. Obviously, through COVID, they're having trouble getting them up and running because the people have said that, and the facilitators, that they're not going to do them unless they can do them face to face, which is fair enough. And the second part of the report is to get approval to forward a letter of support to the Murray-Darling Association to the appropriate parliamentary representatives requesting recurrent funding. As you're probably aware, it can be difficult to try and get some LGAs to join the MDA. We've been lucky in Region 11 this year that Glen Innes Council has come on board. A lot of other areas, there are councils dropping out for varying reasons. But, you know, we've been lucky. So I recommend that report, and I'd like to move that recommendation.
Thank you, councillor Campbell. Do I have a seconder to that recommendation? Thank you, councillor O'Keefe. And I'll now put that motion. All in favour? Unanimously supported. Thank you. Item number 15 is notice of motion or question on notice, and there are no items for our ordinary meeting. So our next item on the agenda is closed meeting. I might now call on an elected member to move a motion that we go into closed meeting to discuss reports of closed meeting. Thank you, councillor Hasler, and seconded by councillor Fuller. Sorry, councillor Hook, I should say, and councillor Fuller. And I'll put that motion. All in favour? Against? Declare the